want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Africa Today. Fogham, where you can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Africa Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.africtoday.com. Africa Today, the best of digital TV.
Ladies and gentlemen, good day and welcome to a new edition of your talk show. And today we're going to be talking on something very, very exciting and important, and is going to be on depression. And I have with me today very two important personalities, and they have a huge educational and experience in terms of our subject matter. And I will go ahead to introduce them. But before then, I'm Crespo Mbecho, and I'm a physician scientist right away from Tokyo. Anyways, I have with me today Constance, and she has a very huge biography. She is a psychiatrist doctor right from the USA. So she has done a lot of work, which I'll go right away to present you here, and to let you know who exactly you will be listening to. Sometimes it's very hard to get to present people who have done a lot of work in terms of psychiatry and in terms of health as a whole. So she's a psychiatry doctor, and she's in Wellspring Health in New York and Pennsylvania, and she is focusing on addiction and on research. So she's board certified with the American Board of Psychiatrics and Neurology. So she's in Case Western University, and she worked there as a medical doctor. And of course, she's been doing this since 2010 and 2012 till 2012. So I will give her the floor to say a word of hello to the audience. Hi, Dr. Constance.
Hi, Edgar. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Constance, you just say hello, or whatever you want to say.
I want to make correct.
Yeah.
There's
sure. Oh, okay, I see. But it's okay.
I am with Wellspan Health in York, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. Thank you.
I've been here since 2005, and in between around 2010, I went to Case Western in Cleveland University Hospitals in months and came back. So this is my main hub. If not, I did the fellowships in addiction and research at Boston, and prior to that, my psychiatry residency in Cleveland, Ohio, medical school in Hughes.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. I mean, it's great. I couldn't see all of that. I'm sorry. And next we have Dr. Enwerim. Did I get the name correctly?
Yes, you did.
Dr. Enwerim is with us today. She's a senior research fellow. She worked in Nigeria with United Nations Development Project, and she's assistant professor with the Department of Nursing at Howard University. You're welcome, and could you say hi to the audience and tell them a word of good evening or good morning?
Well, good evening from the U.S., Maryland, and as I've been introduced, Dr. Warren. I'm in the Department of Nursing. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Nursing, and my area of interest is looking into health inequalities, health equities, and health disparities. So today we'll be looking at mental health with focus on depression. Another area I'm interested in is in teen pregnancy.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, myself, I'm Crespo Mbecho Diabamo, and I am a physician scientist based here in Tokyo at the moment, and I work with Hoken Kagaku, which is one of Japan's top research bodies in terms of biomedical sciences. My background is infectious disease and global health. So yeah, thank you very much for joining this session of today. I'm looking forward to having a very fruitful and very inspiring talk with y'all tonight. So today we will talk on depression, and depression is something which is we find very commonly now in our society. Most importantly, here in Tokyo, and if you look at statistics, just recently, I think 2 weeks ago, the number of people who actually died of some kind of, psychiatric or depressive-related disorders in Japan was higher than the number of cases or people who have died here due to COVID-19. So you can understand how generally the concept and the problem of depression is in the world. So, but then before we start, I would like us to talk more openly and more generally. Many people use depression in their everyday conversation, even, grannies and grandpas in, suburbs of Africa and some very remote areas in the world. But then we would like to know, what's depression actually? How can a lay person understand what depression is? So this question first to Dr. Constant and then Dr. Enward. Maybe shed some more light on it. So, Constant, this is
Yeah,
you. This is your
thank you
field.
again, and hi everybody. It's really my pleasure to be able to come on this platform and discuss mental health. Trained in Cameroon like I was, I don't know if up till now, maybe recently they started having mental health psychiatry residents. Not say what I don't know, but at least until even while I practiced there, we did not have mental health residences. So the psychiatric areas that we are comfortable with are usually when the situation is unmanageable, usually the psychotic disorders, where people see things, they hear things, they really have what you'll call poor contact with reality. And sometimes you see them on the streets doing their thing. And to an extent, we've learned to live with our people who are severely impaired. But looking at it, that's one of the extreme cases of mental illness. So even when I went into psychiatry in training, that was the psychiatry I knew. In between, however, the state of health, that mental health is extremely important because there are lots of, we're taken aback by what people can do or they do when they don't feel happy. So depression, sadness, they kind of go hand in hand. And in the science, in my specialty, we have um, a checklist of screening for depression. Okay, a sadness, of course, is one of them. So the person is sad most of the day. Of course, in children, the adult will be sad, maybe withdrawn and flat and isolative and not getting out of bed. But in children, generally, the presentation may be what we call atypical because uh, it does not mean that the sad child does not play. They may play, but they may act out in other ways. You know, they may be more irritable, they may be more angry. Unlike the adult who may not even eat, there are cases where people maybe eat a lot, so they don't really care for a couple of things. So the sleep is important. You may not be sleeping at all, or you may be sleeping night too, but they may not be doing that as much. So you call it like the interest. The word is called anhedonia. So you call what you refer to as worsening anhedonia. So slowly they withdraw. They become withdrawn. They're not interested in things they like to do. So maybe the child who is not going out with the friends anymore, is not playing at the games, it's just totally withdrawn. You want to pay attention to that. But in adults, that's very classic. So they have the things that they like to do. Maybe they like fishing.
Yeah.
They just don't do that.
All right. Okay. Thank
Sometimes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I think we really understand what you're trying to say, but I would like you to narrow it down in terms of understanding what depression is in a more developed setting, just in a very summary, and understanding what depression is in a a low income setting, for instance. So can you just try to make us that clear in 60 seconds?
Yeah, so that's exactly what it is. Depression is feeling sad, and the sadness goes with some of these things. So the kid who is more withdrawn, or maybe the kid who is acting out more, you want to pay attention to that. It could be depressed. For the adult who is just not keeping up with a lot of things, maybe the energy level, they are losing weight, or they are not paying attention to the idea, or sometimes they are even like here. They are kids who turn upon themselves. You call self-injurious behavior. Before you know it, sometimes people are cutting on themselves or burning themselves or making others gestures, especially the end, of course, is the unfortunate thinking of that they just don't want to be around anymore. They want to die. So those are the symptoms of depression.
All right, thank you very much for that. That was a good explanation for what depression is. But then again, just before I go to Dr. Enwere, I would still like to ask you this other question, Dr. Constance. Um, Usually, the concept of depression is hard to get or hard to actually save with a certain degree of certainty in less developed settings. So, how can a parent identify this particular case and be for sure that this is depression in a village somewhere, say in Cameroon, in West Africa? The parent is, a grade 4 or grade 6 school leaver and has no idea, but just knows that, oh, I hear the word depression. And then, how can that parent identify that for real, this my kid, my son or my daughter is depressed?
I think the index of suspicion should be high. So any change from what is supposed to be your child's baseline, if the child the grades are falling in school, for example, it should probably be a red flag. If, like I said, they are not engaging in things that they used to like, it should be a red flag. If they are losing weight, it should be, or they are not paying attention to themselves, it could be a red flag. Anything that takes them out of the norm should be a red flag. If you have a high index of suspicion, because quite often they will not tell you, and there is no good way to go around it unless you have a very good therapy. What you will say, like the communication is open and they are able to tell you, but quite often the children identify with their peers. You know, so they identify with their peers, and it's not with the parent that they tell those, according to them, they consider deep thoughts.
Okay, just a follow-up quick question. Does this occur like on a regular basis, or is this a rare thing to have? Like, you know, you have a kid who is all very good, and then just all of a sudden, maybe out of the blues, the kid starts, you know, showing you the red flags you just cited. Does this happen? I mean, like, how frequent do we have this?
I don't want to give the wrong stats. I think Dr. Nkechi has some of the stats, but it's extremely high.
Okay.
So this is very, very common. The school systems, for example, here, the school counselors sometimes are very attentive to that. In our system, where we don't have school counselors and we don't have a reporting system or a monitoring system for these kids, it all falls on the family. But it is very common.
Okay. Okay. So, Dr. Nkechi, regarding this follow-up question, what can you say about how frequent we do get cases of kids who, you know, kind of change attitude, change behavior? All of a sudden, the kids who was fine and succeeding in school, and all of a sudden just becomes, you know, recalled to themselves, and, you know, they don't want to have external contact, or they don't, you know, they start acting strange, as most parents will say. How frequent do we have this situation? Most important in less developed settings, where these parents will just sit back and be like, oh, maybe my child is sick, he's got some malaria or something, and then, you know, that'll be it, and then they will try to give all kind of therapy they can. So, but how often do you think we have these kind of situations? Dr. Nkechi, I think you're on mute. Can you just touch the can you just unmute yourself, please? Yeah.
The thing is, with statistics, what we found in the literature is that the frequency, or if I use the word, the level of depression is more with adolescents.
Oh, with adolescents.
It's even more men than women than men. So when you do all those comparisons, however, like Dr. Ebong made mention, when you start seeing behavior that is more stable, you understand? You know, someone can have like a trauma, someone can come in depressed because mommy or daddy deprived them of something that they wanted. But that is temporary. But when it becomes more, you begin to see that character, you begin to see that behavioral change becoming more often. Then, based on what she said, they begin to look into depression. However, we have found out that there's some screening that you can use to be able to trace depression, especially with children. And one of the screening tools is called adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences. It's like a 10 questions. And those questions really ask you things like emotional abuse. An example of emotional abuse could be swearing. Does someone swear on you? Does someone curse you out? You know, that's example of emotional abuse. Or somebody talk down on you. Because if somebody really talk down on you, it will affect you. You know how you feel. So that is also considered as emotional abuse. Another thing is physical abuse. Back home, we beat our children without even explaining to them what the problem could be. Some of those things are considered trauma that build up into depression at adult stage. You also have a sexual abuse. You have household substance abuse or parental separation like divorce. These are things that have been found out based on the ACE. That's what we call it. That's the adverse childhood experience that have contributed to trauma and that have led to depression and other chronic diseases that we see at adult stage.
All right, thank you very much. So, still with you, Dr. Nkechi, do you think that kids who are raised by their parents or kids who are raised by, say, guardians or third parties, which of them turn to, express this signs and symptoms of depression more, or it's the distribution, or is epidemiology just constant for kids, for the adolescents? Sorry.
Well, from like I said, with the ACE questionnaire or screening, these
Yeah.
experiences, that child must have experienced what I consider as trauma between the ages 1 to 18. So it really does not matter who really brought that child up. It depends on the experience, how the experience that that child um, or the trauma the child experienced under that parental care. It could be a grandparent, it could be a direct parent, or someone that took care of that child. So, but as studies have shown that people that score high in this ACE questionnaire are people that will, down the line at adult age, begin to experience those trauma, those depressive experiences.
Oh, all right. I see. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I will come back to Dr. Constance Ebong. We are looking at the situation here. I mean, you're in the States, and we're also at the same time looking at what is happening in, let's say, most African countries. They actually right now have a shaky, geopolitical condition, and it's kind of really hard for children to thrive or to give the best of themselves in such conditions. So let's take the case of Cameroon, for example. It's one of those countries in Central West Africa where there has been an ongoing crisis now for the past 3-4 years. I don't know. And most kids have been displaced. There is no school. From what we see on the media, most of the times, the guys who are separating or whatever goes on, they are targeting schools. Now, looking at kids in this situation, do you think that this opens a window for depressive disorders in these kids? Could this be like a trigger? Could this be like, a course to push children into a pathway of being depressed? Maybe not now, maybe in a couple of years later. What do you think?
Of course, there is a genetic burden of depressive disorders. So there are genetic studies that family studies that show that there is an inheritability, but it's not up to 100. You might have about 30 thereabouts. And of course, you also have psychosocial factors like we're talking about. Trauma. I think it's just huge, the impact that this leaves. Not just even just like Dr. Nkechi said, you have forms of abuse, the emotional, physical, sexual, that imprint on these children or that leave them, just like you have the military with residual traumatic experiences. So they might actually develop what we call the post-traumatic stress disorder. It's the PTSD. And from that childhood, sometimes this actually may be a factor into the behaviors that they have. So of course they will present as feeling depressed, but at the same time they will also be having these re-experiencing these in the form of nightmares and flashbacks hyperarousal. So you have other symptom checklists that will point towards what we call the post-traumatic disorder. Absolutely. I mean, children have to be protected. Of course, there is resilience. So it's not everybody who will develop this, but it's actually, it gives room for a lot of that.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much. Yeah, because this is a very disturbing situation actually we have right now in Central West Africa, where these kids for some years now haven't been to school, and looking at the situation, we wonder if they will become troubled or depressed or having learning difficulties. In terms of studying, do you think this is actually going to affect them if after, let's say, for example, a kid who has dropped out of school and then, has been in the streets for, I don't know, 3-4 years, and then later gets back to school, even if they don't fall depressed, mental-wise, do you think they will just, catch up and integrate as if nothing happened, or they will have some drawbacks or, in terms of mental health?
There is definitely going to be mental health issues, even if apparently you think they are functioning well. There's definitely going to be residual effects of this. I wish we had a system where they get the help, because there is therapy. There is a lot of therapy that's available, at least here, for all levels of difficulty. If that were as available, unfortunately, I don't think that's available. So again, that's why we are having this, so that the families that are take care of these children pay attention to that, and to the best of their ability, try to attend to these needs and try to get them the help they can if the help is available.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much. Just to say that, of course, we have a huge audience, and I can see they'll be sending us questions. As I can see here, in the chat box, there are questions coming in from the audience, but we will take the questions later. Anyway, I'll go back to Dr. Nkechi and ask her take on this. Children who are in, let's say, in a conflict, country or situation, or let's say immigrants who are not well or very privileged to have certain to have a certain degree of luxury, to access a certain degree of medical care, with all this environment which has a very huge impact on them. Dr. Nkechi, what do you see as a researcher? What can you say regarding the outcome, or how these kids turn to be in the next few years, due to the ongoing situation or situations they've had within the past 3 or 4 years? Oh, I think you're on mute. You can unmute when you come live. Yeah.
Yes. What I can say about this is, all these are things we consider as trauma, especially if these are things that happen between ages 1 to 18. Because we know our kids, they are already used to exercising, interacting with friends and families, making sure that they are well connected. And if we begin, because trauma can be anything.
Yeah, that's right.
Trauma can be bereavement.
That's true.
Trauma can be separation, especially when you are separated from friends or when you are separated from families. That's trauma. What you may consider as trauma may be, my own threshold may be a little bit different, but it's trauma. When people die, or like I use the example of emotional trauma. Emotional trauma can be if someone swears. Some people may not take it, some people may take it lightly, some people may, have that inside them, bottle it up. It can be physical abuse. Slapping someone can get them depressed. They begin to wonder, why was I beaten? If you don't explain to a child or correct them at that point. We know about corporal punishment, we know we beat them, but you have to tell a child why they are beating, or else they begin to see love is missing. I don't want a child, when they go out and they begin to look at others, they feel others are treated better than them. They will internalize that, and that can lead to trauma. And trauma, like we said, it does not matter at what level. If it occurs between 1 and 18 years, we begin to see it can come in as depression. And a lot of chronic illnesses have also been associated with childhood experiences, adverse experiences. So
Okay.
with this COVID-19, kids that will be wondering, because I see that, there are certain things that we see even on media, where you see a child getting frustrated. Why am I always indoors? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do this? Things like that. They are analyzing that, and that can show up down the age. But we know, as scientists, till we know and study the impact of COVID-19, we cannot confidently say that it can do this or can do that. But we know it's a big risk factor. It's already a risk.
Okay, so just quick question. How long can it take for a certain exposure factor for a certain problem to cause a child to be depressed? And for how long can we get to identify that depression and say with a certain degree of certainty, that this exposure that at a certain time a child had is causing this depression that we are actually observing now. So that duration, maybe I'm going to direct this question to Dr. Constant. For how long can an exposure lead to depression? How long is that time? Is that window?
Okay, so it's the other way around. What is depression? So depression, like according to the American, what we use, the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which we use here, it's a window. So if someone bounces back, you like Dr. Nkechi said, something happened and they bounce back and they are up and running, that could just be an adjustment disorder. Okay, it could be with depressed features. So somebody is very angry, or they get into something, or there's a breakup in relationships, or they lose a job and they're angry and they do something. Those are adjustment disorders. And there is a timeline with the diagnosis of psychopathologists here. There is a timeline. If it persists for about 2 weeks, where you have more depressed days than others, and they are not eating, they are not sleeping, they are withdrawn, they are losing weight, not shaving, okay, then you say there is a major depression. But you have all levels of depressive manifestations in that. You could have what's called like persistent depressive mood, which is used to be dysthymia. It could be a lower threshold, but it also goes on for a much longer time, for years. So there's really no measure of the impact. In fact, if you go, there is a scale which is more like the stressor scales, and those stressor scales will give you the psychosocial stresses that are associated with that depression. So if the child comes in because they took a bunch of pills, they wanted to kill themselves because there was a breakup in the relationship, you will know that this stressor scale is high this stressor is high on that stressor scale. So the highest, of course, on the stressor scales is usually death. So like if a child loss is extremely stressful, so that's extremely high. It could be over 90th percentile. But then you have even job loss, which is very high. You have fallout. Sometimes for young people, it's not much. You could just have a friendship that breaks up, and then it's pretty huge. And it goes on and on. So the other way around is important. How long are they in this funk? How long has it been changing? And what are they manifesting with these changes? That's where you know whether you're diagnosing a depression, or is it a post-traumatic issue, or is it an anxiety? It's usually the timelines.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much for that. And yes,
Can, can I add something on that too?
yeah. Go right ahead, please.
Yeah, what I want to add on the duration, I will look at it as the risk factor. For example, we know that smoking or secondhand smoke can cause cancer, but there is no amount of or the exposure that you have to have smoked to be able to experience lung cancer. But we know that lifestyle, you have to be careful because someone may be exposed to stress for one day. Another one, it can take years. And then they are able to come back. So I think it's a little bit difficult to say how much stress or exposure of a certain stress or trauma that can lead to depression or a chronic disease.
Okay, so if I get you well, y'all trying to say that it's just on a case by case basis because some people can get to tolerate depression to a certain degree, while others just can't take up to a certain degree. They would, they would give up. Is that the case, Dr. Constant?
No, if I do an assessment to
Yes.
diagnose depression, I need to know how long these symptoms have lasted.
Mhm.
I could ask what is stressing you out, for example, and you can say, okay, I failed my exams, or my parents were separated, or something like that. But now, how long have you been in this funk? How long have you been so sad for how long have you been losing weight? How long have you not been sleeping well? How long have you not been doing this? And so you have timelines for that. If that goes on, depressed mood more time, more hours than not, or more days than not, in the past 2 weeks, it falls under major depressive disorder. You need 2 weeks for that. If within a month of this trauma, like you got into a car accident and you felt very frightened and you don't want to drive again, and that results maybe within a month, that's acute stress disorder, for example. But if you never want to drive anymore for life, then you can see where the post-traumatic stress disorder comes. So it has to do with timelines, timelines. So that timeline is there, and then you have the bullet points. What are the things you're looking?
All right. Oh, thank you very much for making that crystal clear. Oh, but now, given all of these situations we have here, Dr. Nkechi did make mention even of the situation with COVID that we're having now, and kids are like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm stuck up in my home for so long. I can't play out with other kids in the streets. So it's really a difficult situation, and I guess it's not just kids. But then with all of this, like, apparently everyone getting depressed, that's in quotes, how can we manage this situation? Like, is every family, everyone that feels, a pinch of like, oh, I feel like I'm working out myself. I feel like, oh, I'm in the closet. How do all of these people have to see to see you, Dr. Ebon, for consult, or do they have to see some form of therapies? How can this be managed? Actually, that's what I'm trying to know here.
I could be the first line, or I could also be the last line.
Okay.
People have a lot of choices. So the primary care doctor, who is the one that comes into contact with a lot of doctors, right now is mandated to always screen for depression. So you have what they call the PH9, which is the patient health questionnaire. So this
Mhm.
is factored into all your routine visits to every primary care doctor's office. And so they just have a few screening questions like little interesting things, feeling down, feeling tired, poor appetite, feeling bad about yourself, trouble concentrating. And once they have any indication that you are depressed, they can, number one, prescribe medication if you want. We have a whole bunch of medications for that. And also encourage you to follow up with psychiatry or a therapist or both. The therapist also, sometimes when you're concerned about the children, since it's more of behavior, the parents will quickly usually see the therapist first, or even their pediatricians, and they can do that screening. And once they have any indication, then there are lots of things that they can manage at that level. But when it gets a little more complex, then they can send now for medication management. So you have medication management, you have a lot of therapy management that is designed for the different age groups.
Yeah.
Yes, you have therapy for 5-year-olds, and you have therapy for adolescents, and you have group therapy, individual therapy, and all sorts of therapy.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, Dr. Nkechi, coming to you right away. Not everyone has that privilege to be able to consult, to have a therapist, or to be able to see a primary care doctor in some very remote areas. It's kind of hard. They just, believe on what their great grandparents they transmitted them because they're, hundreds of miles away from a nearby health center, which doesn't even have a physician or, a state registered nurse or something. So, Dr. Nkechi, in such situations, and if the parent or the guardian realizes, like, my kid has got it's got a problem, and it's mental health, how do you think they can try to manage this personally in the family, first of all?
Well, like what WHO advocate is find out from your child what could be the problem. Do they have problem at home? Is it problem at school? Ensure that you create a trusting form of relationship such that your child can trust you and talk to you. Encourage them, to be engaged in exercises. Make sure they sleep at their normal time. However, if the condition persists, it's always good to seek treatment. Because,
Okay.
it's always good to seek treatment and then get an advice from someone who is an expert in that area.
Okay. So
But with your own part, find out what could be the problem and
okay.
see if you can talk them through.
All right. Thank you very much. So the parents should try to, check out, are there sleep irregularities with my
Mhm.
son or my daughter?
Mhm.
Is my son, go okay at school or not, and stuff like that, and then try to have a talk with their children. But what happens in, say, for example, most African settings where it's very hard to see parents sit down and have a talk with their kids as parents talking to their children. Usually it's like, oh, did you go to the farm, did you fetch water, did you and if not, and then you get some flogging or some because you didn't do that. So how can they even get to understand this condition? What do you think they can do should in case their kid is in a state of depression, but it's not just customarily for them to talk with the children? How do you think in such situation kids should, or that situation should be managed?
Well, one thing is, like Dr. Ebon shared with us, when you see these symptoms, when you see that your child is beginning to lose interest in certain aspects of life, as a parent, I expect to participate in your child's life. Ask questions. Find out what could be the problem. Don't snap at them. Listen to them. And then that can help you, like she said, be able to know what the problem is. But awareness is very, very important based on the question, based on what you just said. Because if you are not aware of some of the symptoms of depression, you may consider sleeping so much as a sign of laziness. Oh, you don't want to go to the farm. You don't want to go to fetch water. So as parents and as community health, public health nurse, it's very, very important that we educate. Because each time I talk about this, I want to associate it to other chronic illnesses. There are people who are hypertensive and they are moving around without knowing that they have that. If we don't tell them and teach them the signs and symptoms of some of these depression, they will not understand and then you will not blame them. So awareness is important.
Okay. We are getting a question here from the audience, and it says that many people in Africa and in many communities turn to have a lot of beliefs and religious practices, and they're wondering, does this have any effect or impact on depression as a whole? So first, Dr. Constance, please, what's your take on this?
What's the difference? Cultural sensitivities is one of the courses, or it's one of the aspects of training that is reinforced here. Even in psychiatry, you have cultural practices that should be taken into account when you meet with the different ethnicities. So you might have, like, in, there's the famous one is something like ataque de nervios, which is what you'll say 15 minutes of fame of craziness a day, which is pretty rampant in the Hispanic community. And this, by extension, even into our communities. The thing is, now that, like Dr. Nkechi said, we are creating this awareness. It's important that people understand, and they start looking out for these signs. We cannot remain I don't want to say we cannot remain blinded to the fact that depression exists. Even going to the soothsayers and so on, it could be an emotional problem, and it's because sometimes they don't have anywhere else to go. If it's a science that you can develop, why not? It doesn't mean that traditional practices are not good. There are, in QC, Professor Lantum, this was his area, so you have people who try to develop it. I think I've seen even, I think Professor Mbacham now. I'll follow some of their discussions. So there is something into the culture of a people, and it's important that you study. You just have to study to use it well.
All right. Okay, I see. Thank you. Oh, we have another question still from the audience, and it's on superstition. This will go to Dr. Nkechi. A lot of people turn to believe, native doctors or family members have an impact on the lives of their kids. Generally, they would say, "Oh, my son used to be well. All of a sudden, my sister did visit me, and then my child has started, going nuts, and this state of conflict in the family." Does this happen? First of all, is this real, and how often, if it's real, occur? Mostly in West African settings, we do hear of stories like this. So, what do you have to say on this?
What I have to say is, when we're looking at depression, I'm just coming back to that definition, because it's very, very difficult to say or pinpoint that only one thing is responsible for depression. Depression can be social, it can be biological, it can be psychological. And a lot of barriers, there are a lot of things that have stopped people from going to see the medical expert. It could be we don't have enough. We don't have enough psychiatrists. We don't even have hospitals. But back in Africa, traditional people, especially low income and medium income, they believe in spirits. They believe somebody, or there is a curse somewhere that is responsible for that depression. Because there are certain symptoms that they also exhibit depending on the level of the psychotic illness. And they feel that somebody has caused them, there is a spirit. And then when we look at our body, depending on your spiritual belief, we believe that we are a body, mind, and spirit. Body, mind, and spirit. We treat our body, we make sure that we eat good food. So when it comes to spirit, that's why they go into religion. And then you begin to use religion to find solace. And they are like, I think there's one of the NGOs, Strong Minds. They're using interpersonal therapy to address depression, where you have group of people all exchanging their experiences and talking it out through. So that's why they believe There's a spirit behind it. And you know, in Africa, everything, somebody must have cursed you. There's somebody that must be responsible for that. So they try to use different avenues in treatment. And coming back to religion, research has shown that religion has helped in depression. There are some articles that have shown that religion has helped. Why? There are so many promises in everybody's religion that gives you solace to your spirit, that tells you that your God is there with you, that God promises you this, you know, because like we said, bereavement, trauma, bereavement is one of those. If somebody dwelt on their loss for a long time, well, when you give them hope, it may help to treat.
Okay. Oh, I see. Thank you very much for that clarity. And so do you guys, I mean, I think you shouldn't get offended by this question. Is from another listener who is asking, do you guys mean native doctors or people who, you know, practice, let's say, traditional medicine? Do you mean they cannot appropriately manage a case of depression? So do you guys, I mean, I know you're a scientist, that's why I said I don't, but we have to make this listener understand what the situation is. So,
let me take that.
Doctor, yes.
Yeah, let me take that. You know why? Because I've done a lot of work on traditional medicine. So it all depends on what you're looking at, because in traditional medicine, you have the pharmacological aspect and the non-pharmacological aspect. And the pharmacological aspect is when they use herbs, when they use a part of a plant, when they use a seed or whatever to use in treatment. Why? Because we all know it, that some of these plants that we have, by the time scientists go in and start extracting and isolating compounds, they contain medicinal chemicals. Even chloroquine, quinine came from plant. When we talk about vitamin C, we say that vitamin C, if we look at citrus fruits, they contain vitamin C. So there is, I believe, and I strongly believe that because I have done some isolation and been able to characterize and look at biological activity, we have plants that have medicinal value. Plants have medicinal value. But the other non-pharmacological aspect, when it comes to spirits, where they evoke spirit, because I don't know whether there is power in that. Where people say they use mirror, I don't know whether there is anything in that. But one thing I know is there is, depending on your spiritual inclination, for me, I believe there is hope. If you believe in your faith, that if you believe in your faith, it helps with the emotional aspect. But when it has to do with a disease process that is biological, that they have found that there is a chemical in the brain or somewhere in the brain is lacking, then you have to see an expert. But religion will address your emotional aspect too and make you bounce back faster.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Dr. Constance, what's your take on this listener's question on traditional practitioners managing depression? I mean, I know you're a psychiatrist and this is your thing. So do you feel offended?
I don't know that I can feel offended when I'm actually from that culture. It's more like, what should we be doing about it? Okay, medicinal plants, for example, are we really pushing to do better with our medicinal plants? Oh, there used to be like a plantecam. I don't know what the situation is right now. Medicinal plants do exist. I mean, even St. John's wort that we use for depression is a plant. You have the ginkgo bilobas and all that. So we have plants. They are not FDA approved, but in some countries like Germany, they do actually prescribe St. John's wort for depression. The only thing is they have to tell what they are taking when they come to the hospital, so that don't set up yourself up for surprises. Because sometimes some of these, like the bilobas, the patient may be bleeding and you don't know why. You can't do the INH correctly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because it's hard to do that. You know, the like you monitor for coumadin every day, and it's hard to get the INH correctly, and you don't know why. It's just because they are taking some of these medicine, supplements, and you're not aware of them, and they do interfere with the coagulation process.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this, yeah, okay, thank you very much. And this last question, what's your take? It's like a wrap up question. What's your take on this? Say, in most African and immigrant families where they actually, don't spare the rod. I quote, don't spare the rod and spoil the child. On depression, if a kid is depressed during the thing, the kid is becoming lazy, or has joined a gang, or and they beat the hell out of the kid. What's your take on this?
Yeah, there is no room for corporal punishment. It's a no, no. It's a no, no. And we, at least over like those who are out in the countries where it's a no, no. If the child said that, then you are in for trouble. So there is every other way, even if it's a toddler or from when they are born, to just continue to know how to communicate and engage these children without ever lifting a finger. So it's a no-go zone. Uh, it has to get to that level of legislation um, for our own systems at home, I believe. Because it's very, very traumatizing in many ways. You've seen the famous musician who could show you his body, and he has lines of scarring from stuff like that. It's not a good thing to see. And we see that we are able to finally raise these kids without ever lifting, a finger, and still be able to engage. And so it's a process that can be learned, and it's done. And there is no room for corporal punishment.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. Dr. Nkechi, your take on this. Generally, with immigrant parents or with families in Africa, the parent is just gonna do a sign with the finger, and then the kid is gonna be like, oh, that's a mm-mm. So, but what's your take on this? Do you think generally we shouldn't? Do you think generally, corporal punishment or flogging the kid has some negative impact on making the kid who was on a pathway of depression get worse?
If you remember, when we looked at the adverse adverse childhood experiences, one of the questions or some of the questions that are considered is the abuse. Abuse, and that abuse includes slapping, beating, hitting, throwing things on the child, physical abuse, emotional abuse. I still strongly believe that if you want to correct a child, you have to say why you are correcting. But there are people who just keep hitting and you don't correct. Correct, tell a child why you are cautioning them. Tell them why I'm doing this is because of this. Why I'm doing that is because of that. And then you have to understand the culture that you live in. Here in the culture that we live here in the US is a no, no, no. Back in Africa, we see that. But then, that's what we're talking about, awareness. Let them know that if you want to correct a child, you must explain why you are correcting that child for.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for that. And I think our viewers are pretty happy with the responses that y'all gave regarding their questions. And yeah, this will be about that for our today's edition. And thank you so much for being there. I had a very wonderful time with you guys. It's been with Dr. Constance and Dr. Nkechi. Thank you very much. And we especially want to thank Africa Today for this opportunity once more they've given us to be able to carry out this program on their platform, and most importantly, the Patcher Foundation on their KZEC program. So thank you very much, and stay tuned some program on Africa Today. And until then, see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Jamais, jamais, nous disons stop à la vente de nos terres. Jamais, jamais, ne cédons pas au chantage et belles paroles. L'héritage que nos ancêtres nous ont légué, c'est pas l'argent, les voitures et maisons, pour assurer la survie de nos familles. C'est la forêt et la terre. Missy est bon, elle est baillon, c'est ma eie. Missy bonne te honi, elle est baillon, c'est ma eie. Et ma coubasia n'a ton mambo manioko. Be café na bi koko none umo so mo sanga ulia toyana ka obonongo yo sumise irundanga abonisa sakonane non à la vente des terres d'année. Mokatu moti usunu ni fala abanisa tuyana kobonanga tobonanga salaba tobe munu moti batokaka obusi élevons nos voix, chantons sur tous les toits pour que demain soit plus clair. Si t'entends ma voix, la voix des sans-voix, ce qu'on a de plus cher, ce sont nos terres.
partie du temps, mais on ne peut tromper tout le peuple tout le temps. Oui au développement, non à l'exode rural.
Diaspora Banen, chef traditionnel élite, fils et filles, que chacun apporte sa pierre à l'édifice. Mouna ni monde à monter.
Non à la vente des terres Banen. Non à la vente des terres Banen. Non à la vente
Peuple Banen,
des terres Banen.
tous nous sommes interpellés.
Non à la vente
Soyons unis.
des terres Banen. Non à la vente
Mon ami peut qui me partenaire. Mon tante motif faut finir pour l'autre. Mon ami foyer moi.
Nous remercions le collectif des artistes Banen et son président, Monsieur Écombile Vincent Olivier, pour sa lutte acharnée pour le réveil de la